This show is supported by patrons through Patreon. Find out more and add your support at patreon.com/techyes. Welcome to Tech Yes, where tech makes sense. On this podcast, we discuss good products and good practice to make the tech world more human. I'm Dane, and I'm joined today by my friend Ryan.
Hi, Dane.
Hi, Ryan. And this is going to be kind of a special episode because what we're discussing today is Ryan's story.
Oh boy.
How he got into a career of being a coder, a software engineer. What do you describe yourself
I
as?
think either of those suffice.
And the whole point of this is to illustrate why it's important to become technically literate, to understand what's going on in the technological world that we live in. So Ryan, I've known you since our freshman year of college. You weren't studying computer science then. How did you get into coding? Where did that all start?
No, it's a fun journey. I'll tell you that much. You're right, Dane. In college, and in university, I got my 4-year degree in exercise science with the intention to pursue a career as a physician assistant. And shortly after graduating school, I got my start as a CNA to get hours so I could apply. And I quickly learned that medicine wasn't for me. It wasn't something I was passionate about, and it wasn't something I necessarily wanted to pursue, notwithstanding how competitive it was to even get into PA school.
And you weren't really spending, from what I understand, you weren't spending your free time like studying medical stuff.
Well, exactly. I was really passionate about technology. Every time Apple would have a keynote or Google would announce a new product, I would live stream it. I was reading the tech blogs, but I never found myself reading the latest medical journals or getting excited about new therapies or
Listening
medicine.
to medical podcasts.
Sure. Those weren't really on my docket. It was more things about Apple and about new software and new technologies. And I quickly realized that technology is something I wanted to pursue.
Interesting. So you went to college for something completely different than in what you're working in right now. I feel like that's the story of a lot of people.
Absolutely. And especially with the internet and with the tools that are available, it is a lot easier than you might think to transition into a different career than what you studied in college or in school.
So what gave you the idea to go into coding versus like becoming a photographer or uh, some other job, marketing or whatever?
Sure. Well, I'll tell you, the seed was planted while I was actually still at university. And I did take a quick break from classes to help my wife get through an unpaid internship. And I took a sales job at a tech company close to where I was going to school. And I couldn't help but look over at the engineering team and feel envious. And I
Mm,
started to think, how much more interesting would it be to create this product than to sell it or to market it or whatever, what have you? It's something that truly caught my interest.
that's deep. So you were looking over at the engineers with an envious eye, like I want to be them. I want to create the product, not sell it.
Exactly, and it was a very interesting product, and it was a tech company, and I wanted to be a part of the innovation. I wanted to create new features and create something out of nothing is a very thrilling experience that I came to find.
Yeah, and I don't want to fast forward too much, but part of the appeal of coding or anything really creative is you're creating things, you're building something. And from the limited coding that I've done, it's a rush. Like it's really fun to like throw down some lines and the computer does something because you did that, right? That you had that spark, you realized you wanted to get into coding. So how did you go about doing that?
One of the reasons why you see a lot of folks transition into a career in coding as opposed to chemical engineering or even marketing or other things, it's because of the abundance of free online resources to learn how to code. And the reason that there are so many resources that are either very inexpensive or completely free is because the tech industry and the coding practice is so fast evolving. There are so many new technologies that are introduced every single year. There's a new framework every other day. And in order to be able to keep up with that, current engineers need access to tutorials and to resources that'll teach them how to use these technologies. And if you had to pay a college tuition to learn all of that, well, you'd never be out of school.
You taught yourself to code. Hashtag internet.
Hashtag internet, Dane. There's so many ways to go about it. And if you are a self motivated person, If you can set aside a number of hours every single day, or at least Monday through Friday, to hack away and to build your skills in coding, then you can make huge progress. Uh, there are so many resources online that if you stick with them and if you don't let yourself get discouraged, you'll get a long way.
That's amazing. That's inspiring. All right, well, let's say that I'm not a very self-motivated person, Ryan. Is is there what are the other ways of getting into learning how to code?
The way I went about it was certainly inexpensive, but it does take a degree of determination and consistency. If you find yourself needing a little bit of help to prod yourself along, there are other ways than just going back to university to get a degree in computer science. There are currently a lot of developer boot camps all over the country. They'll typically cost you between $11,000 and $15,000, which I know sounds like a lot, but in the 3 to 4 month period you can start from scratch and you can learn how to code, and it's an all day ordeal, everyday thing. I mean, boot camp is not just for kicks and giggles. It's the real deal. And if you put in the work, you can typically walk out of those with a really good knowledge of coding and a great base to eventually find yourself a job.
Right, and they really advertise, like, at the end of this program, you will be able to get hired doing software engineering, software developing.
Yeah, absolutely. Your mileage will vary with those boot camps. A lot of times, their greatest asset is the networking they provide.
Hmm.
They have a touch on the pulse of the local tech community, the tech industry. What companies are looking for what positions? They know people on the inside. They might get you your foot in the door. What I ultimately ended up doing through self study was looking for manual QA positions, and that's how I actually got my foot in the door at
What's
a company.
QA?
QA stands for quality assurance, and typically every development team, if they're up to snuff, they'll have they'll have somebody on QA that is testing the software as it's being
Oh.
built or as it's being tweaked.
Right, and then so that's how you got your foot in the door, and then as you learned more about coding and how to do that, you graduated to an actual developing role, a developer
Yeah.
role.
Yeah, I mean, you kinda spoiled the ending there, didn't
Ah,
you? But
dang it.
but as I got my start, I had a friend who knew somebody at a company, and he said, "Well, why don't you get your start in QA?" And the job was just for manual QA, so I was manually testing the software just like an end user would use it. I would keep an eye out for bugs and write reports on those, but I came into the job letting them know that I had been learning how to code on my own for a few months, and I eventually wanted a position where I would be able to write code. And in about, 6 months' time, they promoted me to a position what's called QA automation engineer. And as a test engineer, I'm writing code that will automate tests for the software, much more than any one person could just do manually.
I think that just sounds so freaking cool. It's a big deal to transition to, like, kind of you spent your whole college career in something totally different, pursuing a totally different career path, and not that you threw it all away, but you you decided, "You know what? I want to do this. This is what really excites me," and then you went and did it, and now you're doing it.
It's a good feeling, Dane.
That's a really good feeling. So, how what's I wanna kinda know this time span from when you got that first QA job to now, like, started coding to where you are right now.
Sure. I mean, as I was working as a CNA, I would dabble on my own, spend a few hours every day, just some self study, learning how to code, and I was doing that for about 3 months before I landed that job as a QA manual tester. And then just from day one, I said to them, I want to code, I want to get paid to code, and they were extremely supportive. They even give me time on the clock to study and to learn the technologies that their automation engineers were using. Eventually, I got to the point where I was working alongside the automation engineers just for training purposes. So the support they showed me was great, and frankly, to my own surprise, it took only about 6 months to get that promotion, to go to automation engineer.
So in all, that's what, a year and a half-ish?
Well, just from starting out as a manual tester to getting paid to code as an automation engineer was actually like 6 months, and then I've been at that for about a year now.
I want to get paid to code, so I'm gonna do it. Boom! Ryan does it. Done.
I think the reason why this is doable and one reason to stay motivated is there is a very high need for talented coders in the United States at least. There's such a high demand for
Mm,
these jobs, not technically enough people to fill those. And so when they get somebody on their doorstep who who not only says they're interested in it, but that can continually prove themselves, somebody like that will get the opportunity eventually.
Wow. And the demand for these types of jobs is not going down. It's only going to go up and up and up and up. So Ryan, what have you learned from your coding journey? What are some takeaways from all of this?
Well, I think we just touched on that point where there is a really high demand for these jobs, and they do pay really well. And
Great
so
job security too.
great job security. I would say if you're looking for the most opportunity, web development is a great place to start looking because there's so many jobs for web applications, software as a service, cloud computing um, that you'll get a long way with web development skills. One thing I learned is that consistency is the key, Dane.
Mm,
Learning how to code can be a very discouraging affair. You run into a lot of roadblocks. I feel like running into multiple roadblocks is a daily experience, and your ability to push through those and keep hacking away at a bug, even if it's for days at a time, that will determine your success in how well you learn to code and eventually landing that coveted coding job. One other point that I learned is that there's so many moving parts in software development that nobody's an expert in everything.
mm.
There's so many different places that you can specialize and you can learn really well. And because there's so much to learn, nobody expects you to be a complete expert. And so if you keep that in mind, it definitely helps you stay motivated.
You've dedicated your life to coding now. Cool. Whatever. Should everyone do this, Ryan? I feel like we we now in 2018 live in a very peculiar moment in human history where technology is so crucial to how we do everything. Whether or not you actually work in it, it affects you directly type of thing. And there's a big push nowadays for young kids to learn how to code, even if they're not destined to become a software engineer or working in code. There's some type of value, it seems, to just becoming tech literate, becoming at least code literate, being able to read it even. Why why should someone learn how to code or at least become more tech literate? What do you think about that?
Well, I think one trend that's incredibly clear in our current society is that tech is creeping its way into every industry, into every facet of your life, whether it be medicine, whether it be health,
Your home,
your home, even
your wrist,
your wrist.
implants, your mind.
Exactly. And if tech is so well incorporated into every workplace, into every industry, into every hobby, I feel like the value of being able to understand code and to communicate well with the developers that are probably a part of your workplace, probably a part of the product that you work on if you do, that can be substantially helpful. It can improve the communication, it can improve your efficiency, and it can make your life quite a bit better.
So there's a benefit in terms of what you're doing as employment as for your job, whether or not it's related to tech directly. And then I also think there's a level of understanding. Once you understand how a certain piece of tech works, there's a certain level of understanding. You know how to work something kind of almost instinctively. You're able to better analyze or process the pros and cons of something. Like for example, with all this home automation stuff, with AI assistants we're putting into our homes, knowing kind of how those work helps us make better informed decisions about the consequences of having an internet connected life.
When you're talking about becoming more tech literate, you really becoming more tech literate, learning how to code helps you become a much better problem solver. In fact, the
Mm,
best Googlers you'll probably find in the world are software engineers. There are so many parts, different moving parts in software development, and there's so many things that one doesn't understand that Google is your one resource to go to. And learning just how to Google solutions to problems can transfer so well into other facets of your life. Maybe you don't know how to install that new appliance, or there's something wrong with your car. And that problem solving ability, knowing how to Google and how to put into practice the things that you learn right away is truly it's invaluable.
yeah, it's invaluable. That's a good way to put it. Maybe this is a poor analogy, but we learn how to write and to read growing up in school, and like that's so crucial to how we live our lives. Even though we're not writers or writing books, I feel like learning to code is like when you're in school and your teacher's like, "Math is important. It's everywhere in your life. You need to learn it." and you're thinking to yourself, how am I ever going to use integrals or derivatives in my life? Like I have see no future in this. But it's like math and how it's all around us. Same with code and learning how to do that or how it works. It's all around us. It affects literally everything we do. We all should learn how to code, even though we're not all going to be developing websites or making apps or whatever.
Now, taking a step back even further from just the coding aspect, but becoming, let's say, more tech literate in today's society also comes with its own benefits. Being able to understand your place in the world and how things like social media and how Russian bots are affecting your
Oh,
life can be extremely helpful and help you navigate the tumultuous times that we currently live in. I think looking back at even just the 2016 presidential election, it almost seems like it was a flashpoint in our society and how technology is influencing the inner workings of our system and the groups that we belong to. And understanding our place in that is so crucial to building a better future in our society.
totally. I'm glad that you bring that up because it's not that I know the inner workings of Twitter. I know how to code a little bit, Ryan, just so you know. I want you to know that.
Okay.
Okay.
Now I know, Dane.
But it's not like I know the algorithm to Twitter, to Facebook, whatever. But, knowing enough to, I like the way you put it, but like we can understand our place in society, the way we understand our place with our technological society. And you're 100% right. The 2016 election was shocking, right? In terms of how social media played a huge part in that and also really affected how we thought about the topics and about the candidates.
Exactly. I mean, I haven't been around forever. I've
You've been around for a while.
been through a handful of elections. Right? But I can't remember a time in this country more divisive, more volatile, and just with more extreme groups just clawing and fighting against each other than ever before. And I think a lot of that has to do with recognizing the echo chambers that we live in
Hmm.
with social media and the platforms that certain people are given, attributing to social media, and just having that reinforcement, that constant loop of hearing what you want to hear and believing what you want to believe without any repercussions, without any pushback.
Something that I've been thinking about lately actually is social media. If we're going to take that instance, that case, it's it grants a lot of power and influence to people that we didn't have before. Social media is not. It's been a while. It's been around for a while, but it's still pretty new. We're still discovering the consequences of social media, and if that makes sense.
Well, absolutely. I don't think you see. I mean, you could argue the 2012 election, there was a lot of social media, but I don't think you quite saw how much influence it could have until this most recent election. And the capacity for a foreign adversary to insert themselves into our social media and actually influence what we think and what we believe, through the use of things like fake news.
That's amazingly powerful.
Well, unfortunately, it is, Dane.
We're discovering the consequences, the good and the bad consequences of social media, of the technological society that we live in. What we say, that's what I meant by like we have so much power and influence because of social media. It's a good thing, but also to our detriment sometimes too. And we were infiltrated by a foreign country, and the way we perceived the election, these topics, was heavily influenced by that. That's totally wild.
Well, sure. I mean, just 2 months ago, Facebook revealed that up to 126 million American users were exposed to fake news content that were generated by Russians just in the past 2 years. Those fake news stories were fake stories about Hillary Clinton, about the Pope, about Donald Trump, and those things certainly influenced what people thought about those candidates and how they eventually voted in November, which is very troubling. Looking at Donald Trump's Twitter following, everybody expected him to gain more Twitter followers once he secured the Republican nomination, but it's become clear now that since he secured that nomination, he has over 13.7 million bots that follow his Twitter.
Really?
Yeah,
Bots,
it's
not real people.
not real people, Dane. their bots. And just imagine what that does to his platform, what that does to other people's platforms on social media, and the relevancy and the attention they're given because they supposedly have such a large following. And it's important to understand in this day and age, everything may not actually be as it appears. That person who comments on your recent political tweet may not actually be a real person. Maybe he's carrying an agenda of a foreign government. It's always important to keep that in mind, and some of these viral tweets that you see go out, very controversial, very divisive things, they're not necessarily from a real person either. The conversation is being influenced by higher powers in a lot of cases, and taking those things with a grain of salt, or being able to learn how to recognize what is real and what is not, can help you truly understand your place in society.
Becoming more tech literate is going to help us understand what happened to us. You're not necessarily advocating that everyone needs to learn how to code, although it it's only a good thing to learn how to code a little bit.
I would highly recommend it.
But at least taking measures to become more tech literate, that's something that everyone should do.
Absolutely. I think being able to recognize what is real and what is not has obvious benefits in your life. And just moving forward, reading the news that you do. Where am I going with this?
Well, I can interject. Um, for me, becoming more tech literate is about learning how the things that I use, how they work. When I know how something works, even just on a like super basic level, helps me process the information I get through that platform or through that piece of technology or how I interact with it. All these new advancements in technology, they're not without consequence, or rather, it's while they are great and they help us and they're convenient, it's I think it's very important to understand what we're giving away or what the relationship we have with something and understanding the consequences of that. Are we giving up some of our autonomy? Are we compromising our privacy? Are we being fed information that's not real? And learning to process that in a good way. So for me, one step that or something I always try to do is learning how something works. Learning that Facebook has an algorithm that feeds us certain things based on our interests, on our clicks, on our likes, on our comments. Same with Twitter. Learning how that Google Speaker thingy that I have in my house, how it's listening to my conversation and where that data goes, or as simple as as even as basic as my web history, right? Who's tracking that? How is that being tracked? And how is that influencing what I buy on Amazon?
Absolutely. One other thing I think I'd like to add is understanding how tech works in your life might it might encourage you to step away from the echo chamber that you're in,
Hmm.
and maybe see the point of view from others, understand a different perspective, and not fall into that constant feedback loop of hearing what you want to hear and increasingly pushing you to a more extreme view, but instead learn how to compromise, find yourself in the middle, and
Hmm.
work with people who don't necessarily have the same background or beliefs as you.
I think that's a really good note to end on, Ryan. Um, really, how tech can make us more just better humans, make us more understanding of other viewpoints and more cognizant of the the craziness that's happening around us in our technological society. Well, thanks for being on the podcast.
Happy to be here.
Tech Yes is where tech makes sense. We produce weekly content, videos, and podcasts to make the tech world a little more human. If you want to support the show, share this podcast with your friends. You can also leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. This show is supported by patrons through Patreon. Find out more and add your support at patreon.com/techyes.